Today's lesson, section 11.4b, we're still talking about shifted conics, and so here I'd like to do some more examples of what we talked about in the last video. So we want to be able to identify the conic of the given equation, and then state all of its important parts, and then graph. So looking at this equation, here it looks like we have an x squared and a y squared. Now the nice thing is at the beginning, you can actually tell what it is, but I'll talk about that after I do all of the math here. So for this one, to put it in standard form, remember we want to put the x's together and the y's together. And this number at the end, 56, is not pertinent to any of these other numbers, so I wanted to subtract 56 to the other side. Okay, move it away. So I get 3x squared minus 12x, and then plus a 2y squared plus a 20y, then equals negative 56. Okay, I want to factor out those numbers because we want to have the a value for each is 1. So it gives me 3 times x squared minus 4x, and now I want to be able to add something in there to complete the square, so I put a plus blank. Do the same for the y's, take out the 2, so at least we with 10y, and then plus blank. And because you're adding two things to the left side, you got to add them to the right. Okay? And so now, half of negative 4 is negative 2, and then square it gives me 4. And then half of 10 is 5, and then square that gives me 25. Okay, now here, the only difference is that because you have numbers out in front, like the 3 and the 2, you're not really adding 4 and 25 to the left. You're actually multiplying the 3 back to it to get the actual number that you're multiplying. So if we were multiplying 3 times the 4, we'd actually be adding to the left 12. So that's what we're going to add to the right. And then we'd actually add 20 or 50 to the left side, so we've got to add 50 to the right as well. Okay, so then now I want to be able to simplify, so I want to combine or complete my squares, so I make them into binomials. So now it'd be x minus 2 squared plus 2 times y plus 5 squared. Remember, those numbers are coming from what I got before I squared, but when I got her divided by 2. And then negative 56 plus 12 plus 50 actually gets me the value of 6. Okay? And then the last step, I want to have a 1 here, so I got to divide everything by 6. So it gets me x minus 2 squared over 2 plus y plus 5 squared over 3 equals 1. Okay? Now I'll go back to what I was talking about before. If you want to be able to identify a conic at the beginning, for parabolas it's easy because only one thing is squared. Okay? For hyperbolas and ellipses, you want to look at your squares that you have. So if they are both positive, then that means it's going to be an ellipse. If one of them is negative, that means they're a hyperbola, because there's a minus sign in the hyperbolas, there's no minus sign in the ellipses, so that's kind of one way of figuring out the difference between the two. Okay? So now I want to find the important stuff, and I want to graph. So since it's an ellipse, okay, the biggest number is underneath the y value, so it's a vertical one. Okay, so then that means a is going to be square root of 3, b will be the square root of 2. Okay, c we need to find by doing 3 minus 2, which gets us 1. So the square roots, c equals 1. So now I have all the a, b, and c values that I need. So then the center is going to be 2 comma negative 5. My vertices are going to be 2, since we're vertical. That means the y values are going to be the ones changing. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 3. My foci, here I actually have values that I can add and subtract, so negative 5 plus 1 gets me negative 4, and then negative 5 minus 1 gets me negative 6. Okay, so those are my two values that I get, or 2 points. And so now I want to find my major, which is 2 times square root of 3. And I can't simplify that, so I can just leave it that way. And then my minor is 2 times b, which is square root of 2. And I can't simplify that either, so I'm just going to leave it that way. Okay, so now I want to graph. So graphing my center is 2, negative 5. So okay, and then my vertices, so negative 5 plus the square root of 3. Now, just to get a range of where that is, negative 5 plus square root of 3, my calculator is going to be negative 3.26. So then it's going to be right about, okay, there. Oops. Okay, and then do the same distance on the other side for the 2 comma negative 5 minus square root of 3. Okay, and then here I go out to the right and left square root of 2. So square root of 2 is about 1.4, so since I'm at 2, that's going to be at about 3.5, and then at 1.5. Okay, so now let's try that again. Don't know why my thing keeps erasing stuff. So there's my ellipse, and then now I want to graph my foci. So I'm at 2, negative 4, and at 2, negative 6. And those are all my points. Okay. Move on to the next example. Here, you have an x squared minus a 4y squared. So like I said before, the y squared is negative, so that means it's got to be a hyperbola. But let's check to make sure. So I want to group my stuff like I did before and move the 51 to the other side because I don't want it. So x squared minus 2x, negative 4y squared minus 16y. Okay. And now I want to complete the squares. So I add my plus minuses. I'm going to factor out the negative 4 to make it y squared. And then that makes that plus 4y. And then a plus blank. So now 51 plus a blank plus a blank. And so then here, half of negative 2 is negative 1. Squared is 1. So it gets me a 1. Half of 4 is 2. Squared is 4. Now here, there's nothing in front of the x squared, so what I'm adding to both sides is just the value of 1. And then, because 4 would need to multiply the negative 4, it gets me negative 16. So I'm going to add a negative 16 to both sides. Okay? And so then from there, now I just want to simplify, so I get x minus 1 squared minus 4y times y plus 2 squared. And then 51 plus 1 plus negative 16 will be 36. Okay, so now I want to divide everything by 36. And then simplify, so that gets me x minus 1 squared over 36. Then minus y plus 2 squared, that gets me 9 equals 1. Okay, so here, this one, like I said earlier, it is a hyperbola. Okay, and this one is going to be a horizontal. Your transverse axis is going to be horizontal. Okay, now I still want to find my important stuff. Now it's important to know that the center here is going to be at 1, comma, negative 2. And then your vertices are going to be dependent on your A's. So A looks like it's 6, B is 3. So that means that for your C squared, that's going to get me 45. So if I simplify that a little bit, when I square root it, that gets me 3 square root of 5. Okay? So now I got my important parts. So 1 is going to be the value that changes. So 1 plus 6 is going to be 7. I'm just going to stay negative 2. And then 1 minus 6 is going to be negative 5, comma negative 2. So my vertices, and then my foci. Here you'll have 1 plus or minus 3 comma square root of 5 comma negative 2. Okay, and then for your asymptotes, now these ones are a little bit more tricky because you want to be able to state what the equation actually is. So you use the same stuff that you have at the top. So y plus 2 is going to be equal to, remember it's plus or minus. So here, because your axis is horizontal, that means you're rising with B and moving to the right A. So then that means it's 3 over 6, which reduces to 1/2. So that would be your slope for these lines, and then x minus 1. Now, because you're dealing with real numbers, we do want you to simplify these a little bit. So distribute your 1/2 through. So let's make 2 different equations here. So with a positive 1/2 as a slope, then that gets me negative 1/2. So y will equal 1/2 x minus 5/2, if I make common denominators there. So there's one equation for my asymptote. The other one, y plus 2 equals negative 1/2 x. Distributing that through makes a positive 1/2. And then subtracting 2 will get you negative 3/2. Okay, so those are 2 equations. So then from there, now I want to graph. Okay. Now it's kind of nice to actually graph where your center is. So our center is at 1 comma negative 2. It's right there. You don't need to label it, but it's just nice to know where it is because that helps you make the box. Your vertices 7 comma negative 2. And then your other vertice okay, and then plotting your foci. So 1 plus 3 square root of 2, or sorry, 3 square root of 5 will be about 7.7. So it's a little bit further out from your vertex. And same thing for this one over here. Okay, and now you can use your central box, or you can just use the slope to get your next points if you want. I'm going to use the central box. So I've already got my vertices out. The B values just go up 3 and down 3. So now just going across, going down, across, and up. Okay, so now I got my points. So there's one asymptote, then here's the other asymptote. So now, from the vertices, remember, you're graphing from vertices, not from the focus, I make my hyperbola. Okay, and then I'm done. Have fun.